So I found that Strata projects are actually pretty versatile for linear as well as nonlinear sort of audio design work. So a lot of you are probably here and you have a background in game audio watching this and you're looking at how Strata is going to help you out with that sort of workflow. But if you have more of a linear design sort of background and you also want to see like what could be possible or what kind of cool things you could do using the Strata collections, in that context, I have a really kind of short, quick example using the robotic collection and some of the material contained within that. And we'll look at using the projects and sub projects from that collection and really get a sense of how you can use this material, not just for linear, but for nonlinear as well. So let's go ahead and get started, deconstruct this. I'm going to start off by just showing you my final design work, and then we can kind of go backwards from that. Okay, so I'll be using the robotic collection to do the design work for these particular footsteps in the demonstration you just saw. So I guess the first thing I could show you before we even go too deep is this is the actual final design project that I'm going to come back to at the end and kind of go through some additional kind of fun things so you can ultimately see where I ended up. But we're going to, without having to work through all of it, I'm going to just work through like the core components of how I got to the final design. But here's that. And there's the video in there for reference. So there's the footsteps and some other smaller, elements as well. So we'll come back to the end, but I have a brand new design project with just the video loaded up, and that's what I'll be adding to. So I'm going to go back to the robotic main project window, and there's the footstep sub-project, or the propulsion footstep sub-project right here. So again, there's only 6 different items here as a preview of the content that's within the sub-project, but we open it up, obviously there's going to be a lot more in there, and there's going to be a lot to kind of listen through. So it should be, let's see, what do we have right here? So the next thing we're going to probably want to do is obviously start creating our own versions of these sounds. So of course, we're not going to do anything to ruin the original sub project. So the first thing that you'll want to get in the habit of doing is doing a save as anytime you're about to kind of make some changes, as I'm probably likely to do with these footsteps. Because if we listen to them real quick, essentially these are kind of in the right ballpark of what sound I want. But there's a couple elements, a couple of these layers over here that I don't really want to be as prominent at the very least. And there's probably also going to be some additional design differentiations that I'll want to make. So let's just identify quickly. Let's see. Yeah, so this layer with these rusty sounds, that definitely is a little out of place for this particular design. So before I start hacking this up a little bit, I'll do a file and I'll do a save project as. And I'll just call this, let's see, I'm going to call it something easy to find later. So demo or one demo, I'll start with a number just because it'll be easy to see on the Media Explorer. Okay. So now we can see there's my new sub project right there. So I'm no longer working within the original one that's referenced in the main project window. Next thing would be if I wanted to actually create a database for our project files so that you can quickly, continue to make more versions and that there's an easy way to access them, which is one really nice use of the Reaper Media Explorer. So I already have a database for this particular use, but again, as a reminder, if you wanted to create one, it's as simple as right-clicking in here, adding or creating a new database, and then you would just go and start adding the paths of the files that you want to add to it. But real quick, we should be able to see. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scan the database for new files, and sure enough, they're popped up down here somewhere. So there it is. One demo, propulsion footstep. Great. And one thing I'm going to show you now so that you can see that it's different later. If I select this, we see there's nothing here in the player. Okay, so there's nothing for me to play. However, we can change that. And this is something that I like to do for linear design is I like to utilize the actual sub-projects in my design projects and actually work with the sub-project as a media item. So I actually will do some editing and things with the actual sub-project, which again, if this is a new concept to you, I'm going to totally go through the motions of doing it. So the first thing that we would need to do, or before I start actually incorporating these sounds into my design project, is I'm going to go to, all right, so there's the footstep medium, right? I'm back here where I want to be. And I'm gonna get rid of my region window for a second. So very important. You'll notice if you haven't already at the beginning of all of our Reaper sub projects or some Reaper projects anyway, there's a start and an end marker that already exists there. And if you're wondering what the purpose of those are, it's actually what would generate a rendered preview of what is within this sub project. So right now, you can see the start and end are just here at the beginning. There's nothing, there's not anything that's going to be rendered. It's just going to be, empty audio or blank. But if I drag the end over to, I'll grab the additional footsteps as well, just in case. So, and then the start, I'll put roughly near the beginning of my footsteps medium, or hang on, actually, I'm going to move that back a little bit. All right, so basically what I'm going to be doing is capturing everything within these two markers, and it's going to make a nice rendered output that is much more manageable than having, this entire sub-project basically working with it in the design project. So the one thing that you do have to do temporarily is turn this off. So sub-project rendering, do not automatically render. So we're going to turn that off because I actually need to render this at this point. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my design project. Okay, and in this window, go back to the Media Explorer, and let's see if this works. All right, so from this point, how do we want to get this into our design project then? There's a number of different ways. I'm going to go over here. Here's my design project window. You could really just drag and drop it in here. And that's what I'm going to do. And then, of course, there you have it. There's all of the rendered final design as far as like what I have happening in this particular version. And I can open it from here now as well, which is kind of cool. So I'll go up to item, and then I'll go to item processing, and then dynamic split items. And here's kind of showing me a preview of how it's going to split them so that everything is going to be cut right to exactly where I have these parameters set, as far as my threshold and, the silence and minimum amount of silence and all that. So this is already set. You would have to tweak this for your own, use cases. So let's go ahead and hit split. Cool. So now everything is cut up so that I can start just kind of aligning these. All right. So I could kind of start cutting if I wanted to. So it looks like right about there's the first one. I might need another track actually. So let's do that. And then grab the second one. Let's see. Where does it come down? Right there. And these are probably just not going to be perfect. I'm just kind of trying to do them quickly. Right. So right about there. And let's just see what that's like. All right. So obviously this one's a little bit off. All right, so not totally perfect, but again, the thing that's interesting is you could totally edit these media items, even though it's not an audio file reference necessarily. You can edit these like they were. So if I was trying to shorten them up or something, I could do that right here without even having to go back to the sub project. And then also, guess what? If I go back into, I can double click it, and here I am again. And let's say, you know what? Let's get rid of this whirring noise. All right, so now maybe what else would I want to do? Maybe I'll get rid of, maybe I'll make these pneumatics a little bit louder. Okay, and then what else is going on in here? There's one metal sound I don't really care for. I think it's this one. So it's a little bit too loose for this guy. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and say that I like, this particular version of the footsteps, the way that it's kind of sounding and coming together, at least to start with. So I'll save it, and then I'll go ahead and re-render the start and end markers, the project preview. And as soon as I come back over here, we should notice that these are already like updated. Right? So no longer do we have the rusty kind of sound. Now this is obviously far from perfect, but that is kind of the idea behind editing these and kind of getting different versions of your sounds utilizing this sub-project. So another thing that you can do, which is kind of a cool little trick, is if I were to come back in here, the one demo project, let's do another save project as, and let's call this one 2 demo project. I could have named these something more descriptive, but I didn't really know what I was going to end up doing, so it's fine. Actually, you know what? Let's change some other stuff. Let's put the wearing back in, but make it like really heavy. Or you know what? Let's keep the wearing out. I'll make the pneumatics a little bit more, and this weight layer, I'll use that a little bit more. All right, and now you're probably thinking, okay, well, now we don't have to go back in. If we're going to use that version instead, we don't want to have to go back in here and totally redo all these edits and do this whole thing that I just showed you all over again. But what you can do is you can select your media items, and you could basically go into the information, and we could say choose new file, or we could say, before we do that, we could go item and then take, and then let's duplicate the active take. All right, so now we can still have the original stay there. The new take is on the bottom. So now we'll do that. Go back in, choose new file. We'll say yes. And then I can see right there, 2 demo propulsion. I can load that up as the new take, click OK. And now check it out. Now we can actually very quickly switch between the two. So here should be hearing the new one right now. And then if we go back to take 1, so number 2, and this could be a cool thing, like if you wanted to have a few different versions, and you want to alternate them as the linear material progresses. Maybe you want to have some that become heavier later. You could just make your different versions and make your different sub projects, and then set them up as takes, and then kind of just on the fly, just try, alternating them to your liking. So that's kind of this I think should be a really good example of at least kind of working with the sub projects, working with this Strata collection in with some interesting, nonlinear kind of devices. Should kind of open up your thinking to like what you could be doing with these. So as I found myself kind of going through this process, designing the footsteps for this little guy, it started to get me inspired. And started thinking about material that I had recorded that was sitting in my own personal library that I just really hadn't touched and done much with. But in the context of looking at the props that are being used for these footsteps, because you can see pretty much, with the universal category system, what this sound is and what the source material, was used to, or what was recorded to make it. So like Metal Impact. So I started thinking about things I had, and I figured why not add some of my own sounds to one of these sub projects. So I made a version of the Footsteps sub project. It does have my own sounds in it as well. And I just added them down here as kind of an additional layer. So outside of what would normally be with this, Strata collection, obviously, and I also used the universal category system. So we can see I found that I had an electric hand mixer that might fit really well here, like a back massager, like a huge back massager. I've used that a lot for a bunch of different robotic type of sounds before, actually. This one is a typewriter. All right. So all of these things in here, I kind of came up with this version of the Footsteps. All right. In the interest of doing a little bit of more creative work, plugins that are also included with your with the Strata collection. So on two of these tracks, I have Enrage. So on I think it's the hand mixer right here. So I have some automation going on, where basically I'm using this electric mixer. I'm playing with the frequency a little bit. And I have an envelope follower set up so that the envelope is actually triggering that change right here. So that's what you're seeing. I could maybe make that a little bit more aggressive. Maybe I'll leave it like that. It could be kind of interesting. And then down here, this I actually have set up so that it's using the envelope from my my hand mixer track. So it's going to use that to basically follow the volume. It's kind of a nice quick way to get a more dynamic layer without having to cut and edit something to fit these pieces. And there's also some pitch modulation and things going on here, which maybe I could make that a little more subtle. All right. And again, like I've kind of been doing, just render this. So if I go to my actual finished design Reaper project here, you can actually see what I've done with the Footsteps. Well, you've already heard it, of course, and I did the same principle. So if I go down here and start switching things, so my version is that third take. So and again, because I rendered that, it changed it a little bit. So you would have to keep creating new project versions if you liked, something in particular you came up with. So I'm happy with everything. And now let's say I want to, maybe I want to render out this version of these designed assets. Again, this is a more or less a reminder or an abbreviation. I spend a lot of time talking about the rendering and metadata and using the UCS in a different video. So if I'm glossing over it, just understand that, I actually do take a separate significant amount of time to do a better explanation of using this render function inside of Reaper. So the first thing is what I'm going to do is go up to File and then Render, which I already had that window open, I guess. And of course, here's where how the file name is going to be generated. So if I would like to add some information to this for this particular type or this particular version, I'm going to come to my data region and find user category. So there's my user category. All right, so go ahead and render these. And let's take a look at them in the Finder. Cool, so there they are, and you can see they have the user category that I added in myself. So I could differentiate them between other versions if I decided to render those as well. I'm going to close that. And then if I really want to be, clever, I could add these to a database, a brand new database I just created. All right, cool. So there they all are. Now I could continue adding more versions as I want, obviously. Okay, so that should just about do it for the linear design demonstration. I really found that, these strata collections, the way that they're organized and just it's like just enough to where I don't feel like someone else is trying to force their own idea of how to put things together, how to organize sessions, how to organize a project, and even the naming conventions. And then especially, I really love that they're committed to using the universal category system, as a lot of the community is sort of moving that way. So I feel like there's enough in place that it's structured, but also my creative ideas or my creative abilities aren't really limited by some kind of imposing sort of design architecture of the strata collections and the way that the projects and sub projects are set up. I could easily see it kind of getting convoluted if there were to have been more sub projects within sub projects, which is not an uncommon thing for people who use Reaper. So I think that it's been quite an inspiring tool. First time I sat down with it and actually started doing design was really with this robot video. And it was like right away where I was thinking of other content in my personal library that was going to ultimately be useful as well. So it's really set up in a way that you can take these libraries and see what they're doing and learn about, the design process of something that already sounds pretty good. The idea is to really make these libraries your own kind of unique aspect, your arsenal as a sound designer or sound editor. And I think it's awesome. It's a really incredible tool, and I look forward to really kind of using it more. And then also look forward to, we'll explore how to work with these libraries or these collections in a nonlinear way as well, using Wwise and the Unreal Engine. So be sure to check that out. Be sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you do have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments and we'll try to answer them as somebody is able to actually get to that. Thank you again for watching. And I really hope that this has been, enjoyable and also informative and getting you familiar with, with the strata collections. And be sure to check out some of the more technical in-depth guides if something that I was doing here may have been a little over the top or confusing, such as the rendering. So take care, and we'll see you in the next one.